This took quite a bit of effort to convince myself to record, but here we go. I actually wrote all of this out because otherwise this would turn into a rambling mess, and quite frankly it still might. Over the course of the last few months, I've been trying to sort out this mess in my head. A lot of things have been going on, and I have a few things to add to my initial resolution. I do need to get healthier, desperately, actually. But I also mean mentally. I intend, at this moment at least, to focus on physical health because that's quite frankly the most pressing matter. I finally managed to get a hold of my doctors today, and the highest weight they have me on record since the horrific plague of 2020 was on the 1st of January in 2021. I was 391 pounds at that point. I know at some point before that I was around 410, 415, somewhere in there. My lowest weight they had on record was my very last visit at the start of March last year. I was 373.8. As of recording this on January 9th, I was at 323.6 this morning. Since the holidays, I've been bouncing between the 320s and the 330s. If you missed my resolution short, my ideal weight, based on my body shape from what we can tell right now, is somewhere between 130 and 150. That's a lot to go, and the goal is for it to all be done by the end of this year or at the very start of next year. But that's also a lot of weight lost since 2021. 68 pounds is nothing to take lightly, especially given that around 45 of those have literally been since September. The goal is that I will lose more weight, and as I do, I will gain more confidence, and hopefully some of the rest of my issues will be able to right themselves naturally. And by that I mean a few things. As I've had time to think about it, a lot of my mental growth has been stunted, and I'm still working out whether or not this was an intentional process or not. I'm sure more on that will come later. Regardless, at some point, at least a portion of it is literally because being fat lowers the amount of blood capable of reaching your brain, and given that I've been at least a little fat most of my life, that explains a few things. There's a couple reasons for that too, but that's not what this video is for. Later this year, or the start of next year, I intend to start going to therapy. I'm waiting mostly because I want a chunk of the weight gone so that perhaps I'll be able to actually think somewhat more clearly during the sessions. Not that I need a reason to go in, but I've had a few school therapists who were unable to give full diagnoses say that it seemed very likely that I have bipolar or schizophrenia. Nothing was ever done about it because my family's thoughts were essentially that if it wasn't affecting my grades, it wasn't important. In fact, the exact words when I was in high school was, well, if they make her have to go to therapy outside of school, then she should have to pay for it. What I need most to work on now is how to present myself. I'm an adult who's essentially been sheltered her whole life with basically no social skills and also very little sense of who I am generally. I don't know how to describe myself without simply describing things I like and why I like them, or ideas I have that I'm not necessarily good at following, and that's kind of a problem. So along with the losing weight, I have a couple more goals. Objectively, my art was better in high school in many ways. I had a better grasp of lighting, shading, and anatomy at that time. Part of it was likely the guided art classes that I was in. Part of it was also generally more free time, but the problem is the third part. A lot of these social media communities, specifically the furry communities on Facebook, managed to convince me that mediocrity was the better path to go on. Art should be simple and easy to produce, and ridiculously colored and overlined and undershaded, and anatomy means nothing. I now need to make the decision that mediocrity can no longer be allowed to fly. I still love my furry characters, and I'll still be drawing them in whatever ways I feel fit, but I need to get my shit together first, and just generally. I understand the idea of a rough sheet is that it's supposed to be a bit generic. It's literally meant to only show you the design of the character, or as like a 360 or whatever, but the rest of the art I do will need to actually have more thought put into it. I have been, over the course of the last few months, going back to the very basics of art in an attempt to relearn what has been flushed out of my head through several years of simplicity. Resolution number 2 is to fix what I allowed to break. And number 3 is learning how to socialize better. That one's a thing I've been needing to do for a while. I'm not good at asking for help without coming off as manipulative in some way. I'm not good at generally keeping my mouth shut when it's better that I do. But I'm also very bad at actually having any amount of backbone to stand up for myself. Part of the problem is that I've grown up in a situation in which I've essentially always been controlled. That means that I sort of don't know how to act or what to do without it. Along with that, I've always been told to be neutral, and the problem with that is when you are neutral, you tend to end up inadvertently harming people and yourself because you're in the middle of everything instead of having chosen a side. It makes me in the wrong twice because both sides are coming at me at the same time. I know this sounds like I'm reading a script, and that's partly because I am, but also partly because I'm trying to at least vaguely keep myself on track to keep this from becoming ridiculously rambly and horrible. Now, the problem is that this is probably going to be the hardest thing to fix. Because I generally try to be understanding of everyone, the idea of casting blame I don't necessarily believe is deserved, regardless of evidence leaning either way, isn't a thing that I think I'm prepared for or even necessarily mentally capable of doing, at least as of right now. I tend to assume laziness, stupidity, or forgetfulness over manipulation or maliciousness. I don't want to believe there's more bad things happening because there's already too many bad things that are happening, and in most cases I'm stuck between groups of people I call friends and either other people that I call friends or family, with neither side having or wanting the full story of what's happened or been happening. And because all sides involved know I'm easily controlled, it doesn't matter what I say to any side because it's always the other side manipulating me to say it. Essentially, I'm caught in this perpetual loop of knowing I have to learn how to stand up for myself better and knowing I have no fucking spine, but every time I try to have one and I try to say something to anyone, it's never my own thoughts. It's always been something someone placed there according to the party that I'm speaking to, and this isn't a recent story either. This has been a loop I've been stuck in since my parents got divorced when I was 7, and I have to assume the problem is my lack of ability to articulate what it is I need to say or mean to say without coming off as whiny or childish, or without having written it out first previously so that I can proofread it over and over again, which is what I have done here, or without coming off as childish or whatever, and essentially needing a mediator for basic interactions. I also have to assume that part of the problem is that I've essentially been taught to be on the defensive at all times with anything I say or do, because anything that comes out of my mouth could start an argument. This is, ironically, part of what has led to my isolation. I need to learn how to socialize better, and I need to learn how to phrase my words better, and honestly, I have a feeling that's going to be harder than the losing weight part. Moving should help, hopefully, because we'll be closer to my cousin and her friend group. My hope is that we'll be able to integrate with them. I'm also hoping that my boyfriend's family and the fact that they actually have a somewhat more normal structure than mine will help as well. And losing the weight will make traveling easier for me, which should also help. And hopefully losing the weight also helps with my confidence, which should also help. Anyways, this is a pretty extensive list. I don't know that any or all of this is attainable within a year, but I do know that at the very least I can keep working at it and chipping away at it, and that's really all I can hope for. Goals that I can pick away at slowly. Let me know if you have any other goals you're fighting for in the below. Follow me on all the holy social medias, and a few of the unholy ones if you're up for it. If you made it this far, then clearly I've done something right, and maybe that deserves a like. And if you want to see how well this actually goes, you can go ahead and subscribe, and until next time, toodaloo. Doodly-doo.